This watch, TUDOR's Black Bay Pro, was one of the most hyped releases from Watches & Wonders 2022. In fact, it may prove to be one of the biggest releases from this year. Now, when this one was first announced, I made a video with my initial reactions to it, but that was based on pictures and what the watch media were saying. Well, now I've got one for myself, and I'm going to tell you what it's really like.
Seem like every captain gotta maintain the cap. You can make change, don't change for that. Tell the whole truth, get paid for that. Bet you never fall off, you was made for that. You gotta be who you really be, shine from the inside. Cause they ain't really who they say.
So guys, if you're new to the channel, my name's Simon and I talk about watches. Well, mostly watches, sometimes other stuff too. If you haven't yet subscribed, please click that subscribe button. And guys, give this video a thumbs up because upvotes really help the channel to grow. So most of the new releases from this year's Watches & Wonders didn't really do it for me. I mean, there was that strange Rolex lefty GMT thing with the date window at the wrong side, and a load of other stuff that didn't really light my fire. I mean, the whole thing was kind of overshadowed anyway by Omega and Swatch's collaboration, the Moon Swatch, which was launched about 2 weeks before Watches & Wonders. And it was what everybody was talking about. And what a clever marketing play from Omega. This Black Bay Pro, however, from Tudor, was one of the few things that really grabbed my attention, and a lot of other people are talking about it too. I managed to pick this one up a couple of weeks ago, and now that I've spent some time with it, I wanted to tell you what I think of it now, but also address some of the criticisms that people have of this watch too. So I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that the Tudor Black Bay Pro is a homage to the ROLEX Explorer 1655, the one that's also known as the Steve McQueen. But a bit of trivia for you here. You see, Steve McQueen never actually wore that watch. The association came about because he was misquoted in an interview with an Italian magazine. Now, I've seen a lot of comments online about Tudor now just being a homage brand and they're not coming up with any new designs anymore.
Today I want to talk about Tudor being a homage brand to Rolex.
On the video I made when this one was first announced, I even had comments from people saying, well, just go and buy the Steinhardt Vintage Explorer, which is almost a direct copy of the 1655, but costs about a quarter of the price of this. Now, not to take anything away from the Steinhardt, because it has pretty impressive specs, and it's Swiss-made, but the Steinhardt is a copy, it's not a homage. You see, in the watch world, the word homage has become used as a term for watches that are almost a direct copy or a facsimile of another more iconic watch. But the actual meaning of homage is to pay respect to another, and that's what Tudor have done with this. Yes, it has certain details that remind me of the 1655, like the brushed steel bezel, the font style that they've used for the 24-hour markings, and even the case size at 39mm, which is the same as the 1655. But in almost every other way, from the snowflake hands and the lack of cyclops and the lack of crown guards, this is unmistakably a Tudor. I like that this design takes inspiration from the 1655, but this is a modern interpretation of it, and you can see that the designer has gone through a process of working out how to bring together those vintage and modern elements. Take the Indices, for example. Instead of steel-rimmed and filled lume pots, on the Tudor Black Bay Pro, they're entirely made from luminous ceramic, which gives them a really three-dimensional quality. The lume itself is great too, and you really notice it when you go from bright sunshine into the shade. There's also a new crown design that I really hope they carry over to the other Black Bay models too. It's more tapered and it has sharper serrations, which make it much easier to grip and wind, but I think it really looks better than the crown on the other Black Bays too. So the most common talking point about this watch seems to be about whether it's too thick. But guys, before we get to that, just a quick reminder to hit that thumbs up button and give this video an upvote for the algorithm. I would really appreciate it. So the Black Bay Pro is not what you would call slender. It uses the same MT5652 movement as used in the Black Bay GMT. And the GMT complication in that movement requires more height, which is why the Black Bay Pro and the Black Bay GMT both measure in at 14.6mm in height. Now, I haven't been able to put both watches side by side, but I have tried on a Black Bay GMT, and that one felt like a pretty big and chunky watch on my skinny 6¼ inch wrists. But this one doesn't. Now that might be because 2mm of the height of this watch is in that domed sapphire crystal. Or it might just be that I'm used to wearing larger watches. But whatever the reason, I really like how the Black Bay Pro wears for me, especially on this bracelet, which is just super comfortable. It never feels top heavy or hard to fit under a shirt cuff, not that I wear shirts all that often. So I've been wearing this watch in a lot of different situations over the last couple of weeks, whether I'm working, in the car, or even on long walks with the dog, and it always feels just right. And I'm much less aware that I'm even wearing it than many of the other watches that I own. I've enjoyed wearing it so much that it's hardly left the wrist in the time that I've had it. And in fact, this is the first watch that's made me think that I could sell all my other watches and be happy just with this one. And maybe a G-Shock for running and a Speedy. And the wife would kill me if I sold that Monaco that she bought me a few years ago too. So I also want to talk about the bracelet. But guys, before we get into that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, click that little red subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner now and see if you can help me get to my first major YouTube milestone of 1,000 subscribers. So I've got to say that the bracelet on this watch is one of the most comfortable that I've ever worn. It's every bit as good as the Oyster bracelet on my sub. And that new T-Fit clasp, as Tudor calls it, gives some really useful on-the-fly adjustment, and I've found myself using that quite a lot as my wrist expands or contracts with the changes in temperature. However, with all that said, one of the biggest criticisms of Tudor bracelets are those faux rivets. And this is something that I'm also keen for Tudor to drop, as I think the look of them dilutes what's otherwise a really well-designed bracelet. But when you're wearing a watch, you look at it from the top down, rather than from the sides. And I have to say, with the Black Bay Pro, when it's on the wrist, you really don't notice those rivets at all. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is the name. And as a former branding consultant, I think the word pro, short for professional, has become really overused. And it's also become ubiquitous with the technology sector, with companies like Apple using it to delineate their higher spec devices. It's a bit like the word solutions. At one time, every company seemed to be a solutions provider, until the word became so overused that it was just meaningless. And I think for me, calling this watch the Pro kind of falls into that category. You see, I'm not really sure what makes it a professional or a superior watch to others in Tudor's product lineup. I mean, sure, it has a GMT function, but it's arguably less professional than something like the Black Bay Ceramic, which, if you've seen my video on that one, you'll know is META certified, so it boasts a greater level of accuracy, and it's also more resistant to magnetism. But tell me in the comments what you think Tudor should have called this watch, and maybe I'll find a prize for the best suggestion. All I can tell you guys, I really like the Black Bay Pro. Yeah, it's not perfect, but for just over £3,000, I think it's a really compelling proposition, and I've got absolutely no regrets in picking this one up. If you're considering the Black Bay Pro, go and try one on if you can find one, and make up your own mind. Just because I'm on YouTube, it doesn't mean that my opinion is any better than yours, and just because the thickness isn't an issue for me, it doesn't mean to say that it won't be an issue for you. Things like this are subjective, and if we all like the same things, this hobby would be pretty boring. So guys, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. So bye for now.
Seem like every captain gotta maintain the cap.